Paranormies, I'm Jen and this is the light side of the paranormal. Welcome to the 31 days of Halloween, where we bring you daily spooky content from October 1st all the way to the most wonderful time of the year, Halloween. In today's video, I am going to share with you one heck of a strange story. This has been said to be the American version of the Dyatlov Pass incident. And if you're like, Jenna, what the heck are you talking about, Dyatlov Pass incident? I have no idea what that is. We did make a video about that. You can click on that unsolved mystery right here. It is one of the strangest mysteries that has hooked me from the very first time that I heard it. And then when I first heard about the American version, I was hooked as well. It's a very eerie and strange story that just gets stranger and stranger the deeper you get into it. And this case is no different. Before we get into it, don't forget to follow us on Instagram. That is linked in the description below. And please click that subscribe button so that you don't miss out on any of the spooky content that we put out year-round, especially the extra content during this 31 days of Halloween. So this is the case of the Yuba County 5. It takes place in and around Yuba County in the United States of America. Usually a missing persons case is reserved for children or adults who were alone at the time that they went missing or with one other person. This, however, involved 5 grown men who all went missing in the 70s, and the case has still not been solved to this day. Jack Hewitt, Bill Sterling, Jack Madruga, Ted Weir, and Gary Mathias were the 5 men that went missing. They were lovingly referred to as the boys, and their ages ranged from 24 to 32. They all had intellectual disabilities or psychiatric issues to varying degrees. The boys all met through a program called Gateway that provided a community for individuals with special needs. And the boys loved basketball. And that's where this story begins. On the night of February 24th in 1978, the boys were watching a basketball game at the California State University. They were actually scheduled to play a Special Olympics sponsored basketball game on their team the following day, and they were really excited for that. They were even so excited that a few of the boys had already laid out their uniforms and gotten ready for the next day before they left to go out to watch this California State University game. It's also important to note that Gary Mathias had schizophrenia that was controlled with medication, but he left his medication home that night because he knew that he would be home the next day to take the medication. So it doesn't seem like this was something that was planned. So the game ended around 10 p.m. and the boys headed to a corner store to get some chips and pop and some snacks. And then they all got back in the car to head home, but they didn't head home. They actually initially started heading east, which was the opposite direction. And they went pretty far because when their car was eventually found, it was 70 miles from the basketball game that they had been to, and the boys were never seen again. Now, putting this situation on the back burner for a minute, Joe Shones was driving through the frigid February evening up a snowy covered mountain to check the skiing conditions at his lodge when his car became stuck in a snowdrift. So he got out to push his car, and in this process of trying to push his car out of the snowdrift, he began having horrible chest pains and he started having a heart attack. He got back into his car, miles from anyone, trying to stay warm and hoping that someone would find him for help. Joe sat in his car for 6 hours until he finally saw some headlights coming his way. He saw people exit the vehicle and start walking around. There was a group of men, 1 woman, and a baby. No one came to his rescue. They completely ignored him and left. Later, he saw the dim light of a flashlight and left his car to go yell for help. But then the light went out and he was alone again. No one responded to his cries for help. Eventually, he started feeling well enough again that he began walking back down the mountain for help. And in this process, he passed a 1969 Mercury on the side of the road. And that is the car that the boys had been driving that night. He had no idea at the time whose car that was and assumed that it might have belonged to some of the people that he saw earlier. But when that group of people came out of their vehicle and walked around strangely and then left Joe all on his own, they were driving a pickup truck. Eventually, Joe reached medical help. And it was the next day when the boys didn't come home that their mothers reported them as missing. And that's when Joe reported that he saw this car on his journey down the mountain. And authorities went and found the car and confirmed that it was the car that the boys were driving that night. They noticed that all the junk food had been eaten except for half of a candy bar, and that they had enough gas to make it home, but it looked like the snowdrifts had stopped them. It was mentioned that the boys could have easily pushed the car out of the snowdrifts, but instead the car was completely abandoned. So they did their best to gather a search party, which was really tough in that weather and the terrain, but they had men on horses and they had some people on foot and some helicopters overhead, but nothing was ever found. The boys' families put out a reward for any information. They even hired psychics and they waited by the phone, and still nothing until the thaw. In June of that year, some motorcyclists came across a service trailer at a campground that they decided to check out. One of the windows was broken, so they went in to check everything out and they found a body. A body laying on a bed covered with a sheet. And when they removed the sheet, they discovered that it was Ted Weir's body. He had no shoes on and his feet were horribly frostbitten. And that trailer was 19 miles from where the car was found, which was 17 miles from the basketball game. Soon, police found 2 other corpses, those of Bill Sterling and Jack Madruga. And they were found 4.5 miles from the service trailer. Police believed that those 2 boys had simply given up, while others continued on and made it to the service trailer. In Madruga's hand was the keys to the car. So whoever moved on made no attempt to make it back to the car with the car keys. And not long after that, Jack Hewitt's bones were found. There was never any sign of Gary Mathias. But they did find his shoes in the service trailer and were positive that he had taken Ted Weir's shoes off his feet and worn them wherever he had gone off to. But they had no idea why. So the most puzzling thing in this case was that Ted Weir's body was found emaciated, despite the trailer being fully stocked with enough food to keep him healthy. Canned food and dried food. And they knew that he had been staying there anywhere between 8 and 13 weeks because of his beard growth. But only 12 cans of food had been opened and eaten. The propane tank was never turned on either, which would have heated the entire trailer. There was also plenty of paperback books that could have been used to burn and start a fire, but nothing was ever damaged in that way to suggest that that had been attempted. Actually, the window that had been broken for them to get in had never been attempted to be covered either for warmth. Talking to Joe Schoen about the incident as well, the man who had had the heart attack and found the car, led absolutely nowhere either. It was suspicious that he was up there near their car around the same time. Originally he was thought to be a suspect, but it was ruled out after there was no leads around Joe and medical testing was done and it was confirmed that he did have a heart attack. But if the men he saw get out of that pickup truck were the Yuba County 5, who was the girl and who was the baby? And why didn't they stop to help Joe? And whose truck was that? It is possible that Joe was ill and hallucinating, so maybe none of this ever happened, but without his knowledge of 5 gentlemen going missing in that exact area that same night, that would be one heck of a coincidence to hallucinate the exact same thing. There are so many whys in this case. And why was the big question surrounding this entire case with absolutely no answers. Why did the men turn east in the first place instead of just going home? Why didn't they attempt to push the car out of the snowdrift instead of just getting out and abandoning it? And on top of that, one of the back windows was rolled down and left rolled down, which was strange. Was it by chance that they found this service trailer, or did somebody lead them there? Why not start a fire for warmth? Why not cover the window for warmth? Why did Gary take Ted's shoes? And if Gary left for help, how come they never found him? Authorities later discovered that the day before the boys went missing, there was a snowcat vehicle that actually had made a trail out to the service trailer. And they thought maybe the boys had seen that trail and thought, people come here regularly, someone will come if we stay here, which didn't prove to be true. They also speculated that Gary Mathias may have talked his friends into going to visit one of his friends that lived in the general area heading east, and that maybe they got lost or took a wrong turn and got stuck, leaving to find help. But none of these men ever thought to walk back down the hill, back down from where they came from, because that's where civilization is. But instead they headed through the treacherous terrain of the forest in the middle of the night, and none of them were dressed for the occasion. It was actually noted that one of the boys refused taking a jacket with him when a family member offered it to him because he wasn't going to be chilly that evening. So Gary Mathias was never found, and it is strongly believed by the family that the boys were tricked and this was some form of foul play. That maybe somebody drove them up that mountain, or there was a reason unknown to anybody as to why these events played out the way they did. Jack Madruga's mother states, "We know good and well somebody made them do it. I'm positive he never went up there on his own. He was either tricked or threatened." Ted Weir's sister-in-law even theorized that maybe the boys witnessed something at this basketball game that they shouldn't have. Maybe they witnessed it without even realizing they witnessed it and became threatened by somebody. There was never any evidence to prove this, but it is thought that, you know, they went as far as their car could go and their car stopped. They got out and they went out in the forest. It's almost like something was pushing them up in that direction. Something scarier was behind them. Now, I cannot at all confirm this whatsoever because it's the internet, and I think this was found on like Reddit, but there was some interesting mention that maybe some of this stuff wasn't released to the public, like how baby blankets were found in the car and shell casings were found around the outside of the car. And that one of these men had a sister with a baby and an angry ex who was looking for revenge. The authorities used the term bizarre as hell to describe this case, and I can't agree more. What do you guys think happened here? I want to hear all your theories. There have been theories from, you know, them being pushed up there. People suggest they were in a really strange area with some type of alien influence. Like you guys can imagine there's 1,000,001 different theories to this case. But I want to know what you guys think. And did I leave anything out, or did I forget to mention anything? Maybe you guys have information about this case that I didn't even know about. Leave all that below, please. The saddest part about this case is that it was also mentioned that perhaps the intellectual disabilities that these boys suffered from caused them to have a fear of eating food that wasn't theirs, damaging this cabin that wasn't theirs, ripping up the books, starting a fire inside, you know, touching and disturbing and damaging items that were not theirs for fear of getting in trouble for it. And that is the saddest thing, that to think that that was what was going through their mind, that they starved because they didn't want to damage or use other people's stuff in order to stay alive. It just is heartbreaking, and I can't even think about it too much because I'll seriously cry. But if we're looking at everything here, you know, aside from the, I'm almost positive, misinformation that came from Reddit, I mean, it's the internet, who knows, but the woman and the baby in the middle of the night, in the middle of nowhere, totally weirds me out. There's something very, very weird about that, and that I think is a really big key to this story. You know, find out who that mom and baby was, and I feel like a lot of things would be answered. So if you like this video, don't forget to boop that like button. It helps us out so much, so much. And don't forget to join us tomorrow for another spooky video in the 31 days of Halloween. And that's it for me tonight. Sleep well. Bye.